Hello and welcome to the Max Out Peak Performance Podcast hosted by Sam Hesh and
Tim Hesh.
we aren't sure how many of these we're going to um, complete, but we thought that would be good to kind of give a background on our business and where we are and where we've been and what we do. So, looking back on it, we started this business about 10 years ago?
10 years ago.
Yeah. So I was in middle school, and what happened?
Well, Sam was a great basketball player skill-wise, but athletically was not particularly gifted. I had always lifted a lot and played a lot, and so I was interested in finding ways to help him become more athletic.
Yeah. So we signed up for a training session led by a local coach, and we started when I was in sixth grade, and then from there we kind of took it back from um, to my high school, and we started running a program that kind of evolved from that other program, but really morphed into our own thing. And we started running it with just eight athletes doing four different exercises. And then we morphed it into up to 30 athletes running on 22 different exercises for 45 minutes. And it's kind of evolved from there what we've been trying to do. Some of our philosophies are that you don't need a whole gym to have a gym full of equipment to exercise because that's not very realistic to real life. You kind of have to make the best of what you have, and you just have to be willing to put in the work wherever you're at because you don't always have the luxury of a gym. And I think that's something that we've tried to focus on for a long time, just using as little as equipment as possible.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think the other thing that we really try to do on a regular basis is work on balance and technique so that in working on balance, we don't need a lot of equipment, and you can make things that seem fairly routine and kind of simple be very difficult if it's done in the right way with the correct technique and the right speed. And by doing that, you can end up becoming much more athletic. And because it's only body weight in many cases, it just is much more flexible in terms of where you can do the workouts, and whether it's actually a weight room or whether it's a gymnasium. We've done these workouts in hallways, in very cramped rooms actually, so it tends to be and really is very flexible.
Yeah, and it kind of lends to our flexibility too because we work with everyone from elementary kids to grown adults. So obviously, if you're working out with that many different kinds of people in different athletic areas, obviously you can't be putting a 10-year-old under a barbell and having them squat along with a 45-year-old who has bad knees. You can't be doing that. So it helps us um, have a baseline for what we're going to do with each client or athlete and make sure that we're not putting them in danger. I'd say too, it gives us a lot more flexibility on where we go because part of what makes us different from a lot of other athletic trainers is that we go wherever our clients want. Basically, we go within about a half hour to 45-minute radius of where we live here in West Michigan, and that really provides them with a personal touch so that if they have a school that wants to work with us, we can go to their gym. But that also puts us in the position where we don't always have an open weight room with no one in it because it's not our own facility. So we're kind of at the mercy of what they have on site.
And having said that, we're really not at the mercy of anybody or anything, because other than the bands that we bring with us that look like giant rubber bands, we don't need any other equipment, and we can have people getting a great workout, dripping sweat inside of 10 minutes, and no matter athletically where they are, we can give them a great workout and a very safe workout without any equipment at all.
Yeah, that's a good point. So looking back on it, we started about 10 years ago. We started with my school because we want to make the athletes better. And then I went to college. What kind of happened then? since I wasn't here as much.
Well, we were asked by a number of different schools to train various teams, and um, it really morphed from one school with a number of teams to multiple schools, multiple athletes, individual athletes as well as teams, and then we had organizations that wanted us to come in, and whether it was a gym that was sponsoring and running AAU basketball programs, or whether it was a medical practice that really wanted to take its PT or physical therapy group to a kind of a different level or another level. We just did that, and it's been really great. The response has been great, not only from the schools, but the athletes themselves and the parents of the athletes, which are always important as well when you're talking about kids under 18. But then as we've worked with other adults, both college athletes and, adults from really 18 to 70, it's been a really interesting ride, and you learn a lot of things about a lot of different things as you do that.
Yeah, and I think it's important for everyone to know we started doing this because we wanted to really help the athletes, and we still want to do that. But we didn't charge any money for up until the last 3 or 4 years, I'd say. And even then, it wasn't a regular thing. So I think it's important to remember a lot of people talk about going to work for someone for free, and how that's really beneficial because you get to learn the trade before you are required to actually know it and be able to provide, you know, um, a ton of value. And I think that's something that we did. We knew how to exercise, but when we started 10 years ago, we hadn't run group workout sessions. We might have worked out with buddies before, but it's not like we were used to commanding a whole team for 45 minutes straight. So it gave us 6 years to really hone in on what we did well and provide a ton of value once we started saying, hey, we're here hundreds of hours a year. I think we should be compensated for it because we spend a lot of time doing this. So for anyone that might be looking to get into this, it's a great thing that we now get paid to do, but it's not something that, unless you become certified, that you're just going to pick up for an hour a week and say, hey, give me $50 and I'll train you as a high school athlete or something. It's not something that's that easy to get into, but it's something that we really have found a lot of value in now because it is a great way to spend our nights together and working with athletes, improving people, adding value to people.
Yeah, and I think the last part of that's probably the most important, Sam. If you do anything for the money, at some point the money ceases to be that important, and I think it really becomes a message that is not the right message. We got into it I got into it because I wanted to help my son and his friends, but we very much do this because we are interested in the psychology of it and making people's lives better. And whether that's a middle school kid who doesn't want to be chubby anymore, or whether it's a varsity high school athlete that wants to be all conference or all state, or whether it's an adult who really wants to change the way he or she looks, it's really about the people first that we get to work with, and everything else is kind of after that. So I think that's really important to recognize, because if it is about the almighty dollar, it isn't about that very long, and you lose interest.
Yeah, and I have a hard time with that sometimes, honestly, because I'm a numbers guy. So when I'm not in front of, when I'm not actually working and I'm thinking about the raw numbers behind a business, it's hard for me to get through my head sometimes. But I think obviously whenever we're there with the athletes, it's amazing to see. I don't care if we get paid $1 or not. When you see an athlete that does something for the first time and there's just pure joy. If you've ever seen pure joy on someone's face, it's an amazing experience, especially when you're someone that helped them get there along the way, something that they've been dreaming of for years or didn't think was possible. We had one kid that gained 10 inches on his vertical in 8 weeks, and half of that was over about a 1 week period where he just, something clicked in his head, something that we had been coaching him on, and all of a sudden he got another 5 inches on his vertical and touched the backboard for the first time from just like grabbing the net, and that's an amazing experience that I think is priceless, and not too many people really get to have, except maybe if they coach their kids' soccer team or something. But it's something that you can measure and see in real time, which I think is pretty cool.
Well, I think too, and by the way, that was 12 inches in
12
8 weeks.
inches.
So, speaking as a parent too, until you have a child who has either struggled with something or wanted to do something, until you see what that does to a parent and knowing that feeling. Speaking as a dad, it's the greatest thing in the world when your kids succeed and are excited about something. And so when you see a parent who is so excited and proud of a child because of how hard they worked and what they've done, it's really a rush. It is one of the greatest things in the world, along with seeing that athlete succeed. I think the other thing too, and this is just a really big part of what we do, and we talk about it all the time. If anybody thinks this is just about becoming better at a sport and that's the be all and end all, or that's the ultimate purpose, they've really missed the point. We train the way we train because life is a competition, and whether we intend to do it or not, whether we try to do it or not, whether we agree to do it or not, every day we compete. And so it's really important to understand that mentality and understand that life is often difficult. It's not fair. It doesn't seem right. And it's all about what you do when things get difficult rather than, well, I'm waiting for good things to happen to me, and until then I'm not going to be happy. It's about how you respond to what happens to you. And we use those kinds of examples with our athletes all the time, and it's something that has proven to be really positive and really a good direction and instruction for them.
Yeah, and I think that it resembles more of real life in the sense that in this world that we live in, a lot of people play video games, a lot of people read books, a lot of people watch TV, and you know exactly what's going to happen when it's going to happen. If you complete this achievement, you get 500 gold in the game. But unlike that, when you are working out, it's a lot more like the real world where you can be working for weeks, months on end without seeing any improvement. And then all of a sudden something clicks and you gain, 10 pounds on your bench press, or you gain 3 more inches in your vertical, kind of like when you get a promotion or something presents itself in the real world where you didn't see the opportunity, and then all of a sudden it's there after you've been struggling to find it for months or years. And I think that provides a lot of real world context for these high schoolers, because we mainly work with high schoolers that they just don't get in school, because even in school you can study for a couple hours and there's a pretty much guaranteed return that after you memorize what you're supposed to memorize for a test, you do well on that exam. So I think that that's really good for our athletes to kind of wrap their head around at an earlier age than most of us figure that out, which is usually post high school or post college or whenever you end education.
Well, and to take that a step further, I've got a doctorate, and I tell people all the time that I didn't invest, I wasted more time of my life in a classroom getting that advanced degree, and that lots of people can pass tests, lots of people can study for things, but it's what you do when things get really difficult and when it isn't easy and you don't get what you think you should get and you don't like what you have to do to try to get what you want to get, that you find out what you're made of. And so again, in many cases, sports, or specifically training, like the training we do, is very much like real life. And I just think it's an invaluable lesson, as I've seen now kids that are young enough to be my grandchildren and my own children, and I've watched parents with those kids. I think our methods are proven, and I know our methods are proven, and I know that we're teaching the right way and the right principles.
And speaking to that, I didn't get a doctorate, but I graduated recently with my bachelor's, and I am not doing what I thought I would be doing up until this point. I had really good grades, and growing up, that was kind of what was stressed, was to get good grades, and I just assumed that that would kind of transfer into a good job and an easier life, but it doesn't necessarily always end that way, especially with a lot of people that aren't pursuing the degrees or the jobs that they got their degrees for. Um, I have told multiple people that since I came home about 9 months ago, all the real life experience I've had with this business, not necessarily setting up the business because it was already set up, but trying to grow it, whether that's through Facebook and social media, through YouTube and Instagram, or trying to account for financials, or working with through contracts with different people, or trying to understand how we can grow the business and what we should be investing in time and effort wise. That has done a lot better for me over the long run, and what I've actually learned, and actually feeling motivated to work harder because there's actually a benefit besides just getting a slightly higher percentage on an exam, where if you get 100%, that counts the same as a 92%. The difference between 100% effort in your own job or in a business and 92% makes a world of difference, and can, make a huge difference over the long run, which it's a lot more impactful to be working this hard and actually feel like you're benefiting from what you're doing. So that kind of brings us to where we are now. I think we are at a point where we're growing pretty rapidly. We signed 2 contracts with a local gym and then a local medical practice over the last 6 months or so. And we've worked with a couple hundred athletes over the last 3 or 4 months. We're at that point, especially since I'm home, that we can build the business and not just be going with the athletes that want to work with us, but we can kind of try to branch out and get our name further out there, and not just the people that know us coming to us. So we're getting into that spot where we're trying to branch out and to grow the business, and we've done a good job, I think, so far, especially since we both have full-time jobs. But we went from not having or just working with one school 3 or 4 years ago to branching out to multiple sports in multiple states, doing training with males and females of all different ages. So that's kind of where we're going now. We are starting to work with older adults, in addition to elementary students and middle schoolers and high schoolers. And we're just trying to get our name out there. So anything else that you can think of before we wrap up?
Yeah, and I think it's the kind of the way to end it, and to leave it. We always believe that it's important to go 110% into everything we do. Our mantra is just work harder. And while you can't always work harder and fix things, it's amazing to see the results when you work hard and consistently over a longer period of time. And longer can be a few weeks, it can be a few months, it can be a few years. But when you stack up multiple sessions of hard, consistent work over that longer period of time, you can truly find some amazing results, and in terms of athleticism, look truly and freakishly athletic. So we think that is also the message and the microcosm of life, and that it can apply to relationships, it can apply to careers, it can apply to the way you raise your kids and everything you do. So I would just encourage you to work harder, just that much harder. Do something, one more rep, 2 more reps, one more time. Say one more nice thing to your spouse or to a friend. Do something more than just what you're kind of willing to do. And that's what I'd say to end this first session.
Yeah, and I think that we've talked about before that you never regret working hard after it's done. No one ever looks back after a workout and says, "Wow, I wish I would have sat on the couch a little bit longer." Um, so I think that's important to remember too. You're never going to regret doing whatever you're going to do that is good for you, and you know what's good for you ahead of time.
Yeah, and I think to that end, Sam, I would just echo that by the comments of athletes I've interviewed as they've gone on to college, and I've asked them after the fact, if you could do anything over again, what would you do? And absolutely without fail, and this is guys and girls in multiple sports, every one of them has said, I wish I had trained harder, I wish I had worked harder, I wish I had practiced more. And I think that sums up, again, really what we talk about and what we stand for. But I think it makes the perfect or is the perfect example of what you just said.
Yeah.
So thanks, everybody, and we appreciate your listening.
Yeah, this was the Max Out Peak Performance Podcast. Have a great day.